In this tutorial, I will show you how the encapsulation works in Java. Specifically, I will show you the difference between using public and using privates for attributes in Java. So we'll use a very simple example of person with weights and heights and how we can calculate the BMI, standing for body mass index for the person. And we will see that by using the public version of the two attributes, weight and heights, you might actually have some very weird behavior from your programs. And so in this case, it would be better to actually declare the two attributes as privates as opposed to public. So that's what I will show you by the end of the tutorial. Okay, so if you launch your Eclipse, and we are going to create a new project from there for this specific example. Okay. Okay, so we're going to create a new project. Let's say we go for new Java projects, and then we'll go for CSE214 Spring 2016. What about just say encapsulation? Encapsulation, okay? And then we'll say finish. Okay, so under this new project here, let's create a package because later on I might create more tutorial videos for different examples which will illustrate encapsulation. For this one, let's call that, so you will say new package. Let's call that just person. Okay, so do a person package here. Later on I might just create other packages for different examples illustrating encapsulation. Okay, so now let's create a new class here, over here. So, and then let's call that person. Okay. So this is not a tester code, so there's no need to actually select the main method. We only do main method for the tester class or for the application class. But for this one, person, no. So you say finish. So now we have a person class. So now for the person, let's say we have a name. Okay, and the person has a weights, and let's assume when we talk about weights, we always mean the weights in kilograms. Okay. Okay, put a comment here, measure in kilograms. Okay, and also double, and then we have a heights, and let's assume we always measure the heights in meters. Okay, the reason that I chose kilograms and meters simply because when we calculate the BMI index for a person, we have to use kilograms and we have to use meters. Okay, that's how the measure that's how the index definition has been specified. Okay, so now let's have a very and then we have a getter method here for calculating the BMI. So in this case, there's no need to actually create a constructor for the person because in Java, if you don't have any explicit definition for the constructor, there is a default constructor for you to use without any parameters. But of course, if you like to actually set a person constructor, it's up to you. Okay, but for illustration of encapsulation, there's no need. Okay, let's have a public, and then we can have let's say we're going to return get BMI like that. Okay, so we're going to return, so the definition would be the weights divided by height square. Weights divided by height times, if you like, you can also use the square method from the math class if you prefer. Okay, but it doesn't really matter. Okay. Okay, so now let's do, so this is as simple as, it can be as simple as that to illustrate our points. So now, one thing to note, over here we declare these two attributes as public. So the fact that we declare these two as attributes as public will make any potential test code of the person or any potential application classes of the person, they will be able to assign any values directly to these two attributes. Okay, because so that's why we don't actually need any setter class. We don't need any setter methods. That's why, because we can directly assign to these two attributes. Is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? Good thing is it's very convenient because there's no need to actually say anything like we don't actually have to say public void set weights, and then you can pass some parameter here, and then you will do the obvious implementation for that. But there's no need because we can directly assign to these two attributes. There's no need for set weight and set height. There's no need. Okay, but however, since we kind of assume that weights should always be measured in kilograms and heights should always be measured in meters, but any potential users of this person class, maybe they didn't actually know about, or maybe they simply were not aware of such assumptions that we are making. So maybe they thought the weight can be maybe in pounds and the height can be maybe in inches or a mix of them. In this case, if they give us those measures, then you can see there will be some inconsistency on the weights and heights, and the according calculation of the get BMI will give you some very funny results. I'm going to show you how that can be the case. Okay, so now let's do some illustration here. So now in the person package, we are going to do the following. So we're going to create a new class. So let's say, just call that good BMI. Let's just illustrate how the get BMI method is supposed to be used. So that's why I called it a good BMI calculator. And later on, I'm going to create another class called a bad BMI calculator, which is to show you that it can also be misused. Okay. Okay, in this case, because it's the tester class, so we're going to need a main method. Okay. So now let's do the following. So first of all, we have to create a person. So we'll say person p or let's say Jim equal to is assigned to new person. And remember, in the person class, because we did not explicitly define any constructor here, that is why we can use this default constructors. Okay, that's what's so convenient in Java. Okay, if you don't have any constructor definition, they will have some default one for you. Okay, so now let's say Jim does. Let's do some comments here. So what's sort of the measures for Jim in terms of weight and heights? Let's say weight is, let's say 85 kilograms. Height is let's say 1.78, so 178 centimeters, which would be 1.78 meters. So now, let's say in this class here, we are setting the two attributes in the correct way, in the way that's expected. So you can say Jim dot weight is equal to 85, okay, and Jim dot height is equal to 1.78. As you can see, we didn't have to call Jim.setWeight and Jim.setHeight. We didn't have to, because these two attributes here, as you recall, in the person class, they were declared as public. Okay, that is why that's why we can directly assign to them any numbers we like. But the problem is really about this any number business, because it can be any numbers when we are using the right numbers, namely we're using kilograms and meters, then we are okay. However, as we will show later in a later class called bad BMI calculator, if we assign some numbers that's actually using the wrong measure, then the calculation will still go on, but it will produce some very weird result to you. Okay, I'll illustrate that in a moment. Okay, so now this is the correct usage of the correct assignments to two attributes. So now let's do a very simple test. System.out.println, and we can say Jim's BMI is, and then we'll say Jim.get BMI. Okay, so now let's see. So now we can run this application class, and we say run as Java application. Okay, So this is Jim's BMI. Okay, that's 26 point something. Okay, this is the correct calculation. All right. So now let's do another application of the person class and illustrate how things might go wrong. Okay, and to be a good programmer, you should really try to avoid the best situation as much as possible. Okay, so let's see how the best situations might occur. So new class, let's call that bad BMI calculator. Okay, and we also need a main method for that. Finish. Okay, so let's do something very similar. Let me just be a little bit lazy here. So let me just copy this part of the code. Okay, but I'm going to do something slightly different in the bad BMI calculator. So now, so this part is the same. So we are still creating a new person object called Jim. And then now let's assume Jim is still 85 kilograms and height is 1.78 meters. Okay, let me also define something here for you. Okay, so let's define two constants here. So final double, let's say kilograms in pounds. Okay, so 1 kilogram is actually 2.2 pounds. Okay, that's something you can look up on the web. So that's the standard definition, standard conversion mechanism between the two units. Also final double, and then meters in inches, which I believe is about 39. Okay, that should be accurate enough. So now, let's say we got in this application class here, we actually got two constant here to do the conversion. So now let's say when we are trying, so now we are in the application of the person class. Okay, so in this class here, we are trying to use the person class, but somehow we did not know about these two assumptions. You see, these two assumptions that weights should be in kilograms and the height should be in meters. So these are the assumptions, or these are the expected usages of these two attributes. Let's say we, as the bad BMI calculator, we did not know about these two assumptions. So now let's say we thought we should always pass pounds for the weights. So we say times kilograms in pounds, and also we have also for the heights we should always pass inches. So times meters in inches. Okay, let's say that's how we thought the person class should be used. As you can see now, our expectation is inconsistent with the, so our expectation as the bad BMI calculator is absolutely inconsistent with the two assumptions here in the person class. So there's an inconsistency there. So that's why the result will be very strange. So now if you go back to the bad BMI calculator here, as you can see, there's nothing that stops us as the bad BMI calculator to assign these two kind of wrong numbers to the two attributes, simply because we actually declare the person class, the two attributes, as the public attributes. So there's no way, there's no mechanism for Java to check on what kind of values we are assigning to weights and heights. There's nothing to prevent us from assigning any wrong values to these two attributes. So in this bad BMI, that's why you see either we assign 85 or we assign 85 times this number here. Doesn't matter. Java doesn't care. So Java is assuming that we are going to assign the correct values, but there's no guarantee. Okay, that's where the problem is. Okay, so now we set the weights and we set the heights into pounds and inches. Okay, let's see what's going to be the result. The previous calculation in the good BMI calculator was 26 something. So now let's try this one for the bad calculator. So now run as Java application. So this is something we get 0.0388, etc. So this cannot be right because a person simply cannot be this slim. This simply doesn't make any sense at all. So as you can see now, this is where the problem is. Let me recap what the problem is. In the person class, we declare these two attributes, weights and heights, as public. And we are making the implicit assumptions that weights should be measured in kilograms and heights should be measured in meters, simply because because the ultimate calculation we would like to do is to get a BMI. And the BMI should always be calculated according to its definition in terms of weights in kilograms and heights in meters. Okay, so in the person class, we simply assume any potential user of the person class is going to assign some numbers in kilograms to the weights and some number in meters to the heights. That's what we're assuming. But there's nothing that can prevent any bad user or ignorant user from doing the wrong thing. So you can see that we actually got two users of the person class. The good user, the good BMI calculator, they are really assigning the right numbers to the weights and heights. They are assigning 85 kilograms and 1.78 meters. On the other hand, this bad user here, they didn't know about, or they simply ignored the fact that weights should be in kilograms and heights should be in meters. They simply just somehow did some conversions before they actually assign the number. So in this case, they are really assigning some number in pounds to the weights, and they are also assigning inches to the heights. So as you can see again, so the expectations of this bad user here is absolutely inconsistent with the assumptions we made in the person class. So there's some inconsistency here. And we should really try as much as possible to actually prevent such situation. So now the solution would be, so there are actually two parts of the solution. The first part is we want to disallow the possibility for any user of the person class to directly assign to these two attributes. Okay, that's part number one. Okay, let's focus on part number one first. Because you can see in the bad user, they can just assign any number they like to the weights or to the heights. So we want to disallow that. How do we do that? Okay, let me show you step number one. The way to do that in Java is to say, so when you say public, that means any class other than person can get access to these two attributes. When I say they can get access to it, which means they can read it, or they can write to it, or they can assign to it. So now that's why in a good BMI calculator, we could assign to the weights, we could assign to the heights, and similarly, in a bad BMI calculator, we could assign to both attributes as well. So now to prevent that, Java provides another keyword called private. So if I do that, so change them to privates. So now we got some compile time error, which is expected. Let me explain to you. So now if you go to the bad BMI calculator, so now you can see these two lines no longer compile. Why? Let's see what the error says. If you just move your mouse over here, it says that the field person.weights is not visible. Aha! So if you go back to the person class, you see that these two attributes are privates, which means only the person class itself can read or write, can read from it or to write to it. Any class outside the person class will not be able to see these two attributes. Of course, that means they cannot read it and they cannot write to it. So now, actually, remember that's part one of the solution. We wanted to disallow any potential user of the person class to actually directly assign to it. And now we have just achieved that by changing the two attributes from public to private. Okay, so now, however, you can see now we have a compile time error. So part one of the solution is simply not sufficient. So here comes the part two. Part two really is concerned about, so now the two attributes cannot be assigned directly, but how do we change their values? Eventually, we have to set up weights and heights from good BMI calculator and from the bad BMI calculator. So how do we do that? The way to do that is to say for the attributes themselves, we make them private, but we also provide some appropriate setters or mutator methods to actually set their values properly. And now we can actually gain more control as to how these two attributes should be set. Remember before, the bad BMI calculator was simply not clear about the assumption about how the weight and height should be set. They are now really sure about whether that should be in pounds or should that be in kilograms, and should that be in inches or should that be in meters. Okay, so why don't we provide the proper setter methods for any potential users of the person class? What I meant is this. So let's say for the weights, we're going to, so public, because any potential user can use the setters or the mutators. Public void doesn't return anything. Set weights in kilograms. So you can see the method name itself is very, very clear about what kind of number it should pass. You should only pass numbers measured in kilograms, right? Set weights in kilograms. So here you would say double. Let me just K. So K for kilograms. Okay, some kilogram number here. And you would say weight is equal to K. Because we are still maintaining the assumption that weights should be measured in kilograms. So now we can directly assign that to it. Okay, so now a kind of symmetric mutator we should create would be public void set weights in pounds. Okay, so now double and then pounds. Okay, let me also copy from the bad BMI calculator these two constants, so they are actually quite useful. So let me just go back and put them here. Okay, so now we have these two constants here. So now if the user actually pass some numbers in pounds, how do we convert that back to the number in kilograms such that it is consistent with our original assumption? So what we can do is to say weights is equal to pounds, because this is actually, so 1 kilograms is equal to 2.2 pounds. So if so for example, if the person give us 4.4 pounds, to convert that back to kilograms, we should divide that by kilograms in pounds, right? So we're gonna say kilograms in pounds. Okay, so I hope that's straightforward. So now what we have achieved is that we got two versions of the set weights methods, and we try to make it very explicit and clear about which numbers, which measures you provide when you provide the numbers. And one should be in kilograms, and the other one should be in pounds. Okay, similarly, we are gonna have two set methods for set the heights. So void set heights and let's say meters. So this, in this case, it will be consistent with our assumption here. And by the way, because these two assumptions are in comments, so comments are never part of the program. That's why we have to somehow do something about to make sure the assumptions are really met by our software code, by our Java code. So double, okay, let's say if we give some meters here, so if we are given a meter measure that's consistent with our implicit assumption, so this will be fine. It would just be a direct assignment. Height is equal to m. Okay, let's have another one, which will be very similar to this. Okay, so public void set heights in inches. Okay, double. I'll just say inches I. So now we would say height is equal to, and then similarly we're going to divide it by meters in inches. Okay, so we're going to convert the inches back to the meters so that whatever we assign to the heights will be in meters, and that'll be consistent with our implicit assumption here. Okay, so now we have defined 4 appropriate setter methods for these two attributes. So these, and because these 4 setter methods are declared as public, so any potential users like good BMI calculator and bad BMI calculator can use them. Okay, so again, we do not want any potential users of the person class to directly assign to weights and heights. What we want to do instead is to provide with them some some choices of the setter methods, so they can choose which is the appropriate one to use. Okay, if you simply allow them, if we simply declare these two as public and allow any numbers to be assigned, you will actually get a funny result, which I show you. You get some BMI value that's below 1, which simply doesn't make any real sense. Okay, let's go back to, first of all, good BMI calculator, because we can no longer assign directly to weights and heights, because in the person class, these two attributes have been changed to privates. So now what we got to do instead is by calling the appropriate setter. Okay, so we'll set the weights in kilograms. 85, right? And also set heights in meters. In this case, okay. So now let's try again to see if the result will still be the same. So just run a good BMI calculator. Run as Java application. Okay, because the bad BMI calculator is not compiled yet. Okay, let's just wait a bit. Okay, let's wait a bit. So now in the bad BMI calculator, so now this is the main thing. So we will like the good BMI calculator and the bad BMI calculator to actually produce the same results because of the fix we just implemented. So now we can say gym.set weights in pounds. So we can still use this number here, but now you can see that although, so now in the bad BMI calculator, although we think that the weight should be set in terms of the pounds, but now we're just calling the right set method. So you can see under the hood, the measurements in pounds will be converted back to the kilograms when the BMI calculation will take place. Okay, I hope you really see the difference here. Okay, and set the heights in inches. Okay, rather than in meters. Okay, so now so now we have fixed all the compilation errors, and now let's see what kind of result we get. Okay, okay, let's get good BMI calculator first. I remember it's about 26 something. Okay, that's about right. 26 something. And what about bad one? That's also 26 something. Okay, so now you can see for both the good BMI calculator and the bad BMI calculator, we are producing the consistent results. Let me recap again before I move on to the final points. So remember the first version of the person we had, we declare weights and heights as public, okay? And without any setter methods for weight and height. That's sort of the first version we had. However, for that version there, you actually allowed application like maybe bad BMI calculator to assign some very funny numbers, maybe some inconsistent numbers to it because in the person class, we assume any user will actually assign kilograms to weights and meters to heights. But a bad BMI calculator actually assign pounds to the weights and inches to the heights, right? Because those two attributes were just public, so you could assign anything to it without being warned or being caught in Java. And then we actually, so when the BMI was actually calculated in terms of the pounds and inches, you just produce the wrong result. The result simply doesn't make any real sense. So the solution we had had two parts. So the first part was to actually change from public to private. So this will effectively disallow any direct assignments to the two attributes. Okay, and that's actually what made the two classes of bad BMI calculator and good BMI calculator fail to compile. Okay, that's the first part. And the second part of the solution is since these two attributes were no longer be able to be assigned to any potential application classes, so we had to provide the appropriate setter methods for them. And the way we did it was to say, to set the weights, we have to be very clear and explicit about which measure we are talking about. So that's why we got two versions of the setter methods for the weights. So we said, if you call the set weights in kilograms, you should pass the number in kilograms. If you want to set the weights in pounds, then you should really call this method instead. And similarly for heights, either it can be in meters or in inches. So now, in the good BMI calculator, they will simply just choose the right method. So you'll be in kilograms and in meters. And now in the bad BMI calculator, maybe before they were simply confused whether they should use kilograms or pounds. But now, since we provided the explicit choices for them, so now if they really wanted to pass the pounds to set the weights, they will just have to call the appropriate setter method. So we eliminated. We should say we very much decreased the chances of making such inconsistent results. Okay, so now let me illustrate a final point. Okay, so now you can see that we have a person class and we have two applications of the person. So good BMI calculator is a so BMI, so good BMI calculator is the user number one of the person class, and bad BMI calculator is user number two of the person class. So now my question to you is, our assumptions before were that we assume the weights and heights should be measured in terms of kilograms and meters respectively. Okay, so now I got a question for you. Okay, I'll write down the question for you over here. Okay, and then I will also do the solution as well. It will be a very important point to actually illustrate the encapsulation. So what happens when our assumptions change? Okay, so now let me tell you what, okay, that is weights should be measured in. So when I say, okay, attributes weights should store a value of pounds rather than kilograms, attributes heights should store a value of, let's say, inches. Okay. Okay, now, what class or classes should be changed? Okay, so that's my question for you. So if you like, you can pause the video and then think about this question and how you might change. So to answer this question, just tell me which class should be changed. Apparently, we got only 3 classes, so at most, you can change to 3 classes, or you want to create a new class, but I don't think that's necessary. So your answer should be, tell me which classes should be changed and how that change should be implemented. Okay, if we want to have this opposite assumption instead. Okay, so current assumption is the weights should be measured in kilograms and the height should be in meters. That is why you can see for these two set of methods here, we actually have to do the conversion back to the values that are consistent with our assumptions. So now we're just changing the assumptions now. So which class should we change? Should we only have to change the person class, or should we also change the BMI, the good BMI calculator and the bad BMI calculator? Okay, that's my question to you. So if you want to think about it, pause the video and replay it when you actually want to check your answer. Okay, so now let me tell you the answer to this question here. And this is actually why we actually teach you the idea about encapsulation. Namely, we actually make attributes private and we provide public setter methods or sometimes getter methods as well for those private attributes. Okay, so now the idea is if you somehow change in general, if you change the interpretation or maybe you change the way you represent the attributes in this class here, all you gotta do, because they were private, which means there were no existing users that were able to refer to them anyway. Okay, let me say that again. Because, for example, because these two attributes were made private, so that means there were no existing users, for example, good BMI calculator and bad BMI calculator, so there were no existing users that were able to get access to them anyway. Okay, so when we changed the interpretation of these two attributes, all we gotta do is to change the way we implement their corresponding setters or getters. Okay, that's all we gotta do. Okay, and once we change the way we implement the setter methods, there's nothing else to be changed, which means the existing users, like a good BMI calculator, when they call this public setter, the behavior would just be correct. Okay, there's nothing else to be changed. Okay, let's see how that can happen. So now, let's say we change our assumption. So let's say the weight should be measured in pounds, and now the height should be measured in inches. Okay, let's say now we have changed our assumption. So now, since we changed our assumption, so now the uh, the the place where inconsistency might occur is different, right? So now, it used to be that it would cause some inconsistency if we were trying to set the number in pounds. But now, because we changed the assumption, so now it should be measured in pounds. So now this one should go away. So the number in pounds can be assigned to the weights attributes directly. On the other hand, if you actually got kilograms, you have to convert that into pounds. So that'll be multiply kilograms in pounds. Okay. Similarly, because we also changed the assumption in heights of heights from meters into inches. So now the case where you actually assign inches will no longer need any further conversion. On the other hand, for meters, you have to convert that back to the new assumption, the inches. So meters in inches. Okay, so now everything still compiles. So now there will be no further change we have to make the result right. Okay, so now let's take one example. One thing for example. So now let's say in the bad calculator. So now when you actually say Jim does set weight in pounds, so this is a number in pounds. Look what happens. So 85 times this number here. So this will actually call set weights in pounds. So this will just assign the correct value to weights directly. And then when we actually calculate the BMI, oh, by the way, so this will also have to be changed, right? So now, because now the measure is actually the in pounds and in inches, so we also have to change this method because BMI always has to be calculated in terms of meters and kilograms. So let's see, let me do this. So I can say double. So that is why I said when you actually change the assumptions, you may have to examine every method to see any affected method should be updated or should be re-implemented accordingly. So now weights in kilograms is equal to, because now our assumption is the weight should be measured in pounds, right? So weights divided by kilograms in pounds. Okay, similarly. Okay, so you may not actually just follow sort of the math conversion right away. So that's why I'm making this tutorial video. So please think through why, when we change the two assumptions to these new assumptions here, why do we have to change all the public setters and getter methods? So these are all the methods that are actually affected. But that's it. So these methods are all belong to the person class, which is where we are changing the assumption. But once we are done with it, all the other existing user classes do not have to be changed. That's the beauty about encapsulations, because whenever you change the decision, or we call the implementation secrets of a class, okay, because those secrets like weight and height were made private anyway. So when you change the secrets, you wouldn't affect anyone else, only yourself. Okay, that's really the essence about encapsulation. It's quite a advanced concept, but it's required for this course. So that's why I'm teaching this in very thorough details. Okay, so now let's do this one as well. So there'll be heights in meters. So now, because the new interpretation about the height will be in inches, but we had to convert it back to the meters. Meters in inches. Okay, so now we're going to use, rather than weights, going to use weight in kilograms and heights and heights. Okay, so now let's go back to the bad BMI calculator. So now when we actually set the pounds and also inches to Jim, we are actually going to call, let me show you, we're actually going to call this method here to set the weights. So you'll be directly assigned to the weights, because the new assumption is it should be measured in pounds. And also, we will call this method for setting the heights because the new assumption is it will be measured in inches for heights. So now, when we actually calculate the BMI, as you can see in the bad BMI calculator here, when you say Jim.get BMI, it is actually going to do the right thing because the get BMI method knows that our new assumptions are pounds and inches, but to calculate the BMI, we should really use kilograms and meters. So you will actually know how to do the right calculation, and before that, we should you will know how to do the right calculations by doing some conversions beforehand. Okay, so please work out. It's quite actually many important points I talk about in this tutorial video, so you really have to think them through. Okay, I might be able to provide with you maybe some other examples later in the course, but this will be the easiest one to actually illustrate the idea about encapsulation. Okay, so now let me just run the good and bad calculator and see what happens. So again, after we actually changed the assumptions to pounds and inches, the only class we changed was the person class. So we didn't actually touch the good BMI calculator, and we didn't touch the bad BMI calculator. We didn't touch them at all. Okay, that's really important to note. So now for good BMI calculator, run as Java application, we still get 26. That's still the correct number. What about bad BMI calculator? And 26. Okay, so now you can see even though we changed the internal assumptions about the weights and heights for person, and because they were declared as privates, so that means all the existing users of the person class were not able to access to them anyway. Okay, so that means we don't have to change any of the existing user classes of the person class. The only thing we have to change is the public setters, sometimes maybe private as well, but to change all the relevant setters and getters. In this case, we have to change all the setters for weights and heights, and also the getter for the BMI. Okay? Okay, that's actually about what I want to say in this tutorial video. Okay, there are actually many important points I illustrated here about encapsulation. Okay, so okay, just for your convenience, let me just recap one more time briefly. In the very beginning of the tutorial video, we tried public and public for these two attributes, but we realized that, of course, if you got a good user, you can get the fine results, you can get an accurate result. However, if you get a bad user, they might directly assign maybe some numbers, for example, in pounds and in inches, and those numbers are simply inconsistent with your original assumption. Remember, before we changed the assumptions to pounds and inches, they were in kilograms and meters, right? Okay, that's what we illustrated, and we said that to actually avoid that kind of situation, we actually make these two attributes privates to say how we actually interpreted the weights and heights is a secret in the person class. So that's why we actually make them privates. And what we did instead is to make the way we actually set the weight and height as public setter methods. That's why we got set weights in kilograms and set weights in pounds. Okay, and then and then after that, it will force the good BMI calculator and the bad BMI calculator to actually call the appropriate setter methods to actually set the weight and heights. Okay, and then I went further to actually discuss what if the internal assumptions or so-called implementation secrets actually changed. Let's say the weights will be measured in pounds and the heights will be measured in inches. In this case, in short, the only class we have to change is where the implementation secret locates. In this case, person class is the only place to change. So what we did was we actually changed all the relevant setters and getters. In this case, we have to change all the 4 setters. You can refer back to the videos to see how I changed them. And also we have to change the way we calculate the BMI by doing some conversion first. And that's it. And we did not have to change any of the user classes that use the person class. Okay, that's about what I wanted to say about this encapsulation idea It's a very, very important idea. I know it's actually not so easy to grasp the first time, but that's why I'm making this tutorial video. Please try to watch this video a second time or a third time if you just want to get the idea straight. Or maybe you can talk to me about how this encapsulation works out in Java. Okay, stay watching.